What would you think if a successful businessman, someone who seems to have it all, suddenly discovers he has a son he never knew about? Thaddius Kretton, a powerful real estate mogul, lived a life of luxury and control until a young man named Callum walked into his office claiming to be his child. As Thaddius's carefully constructed world began to unravel, the truth of his past choices came crashing down. Stay tuned to see how this shocking revelation changes everything for both father and son. It was a bitter December evening in Boston when Thaddius Kretton slammed his crystal tumbler on the mahogany desk, bourbon splashing onto the imported papers. His face, typically composed for boardroom battles, contorted with rage and disbelief as the word escaped through clenched teeth. "And you expect me to believe this child is mine?" Ilone stood by the fireplace, her hands protectively cradling her still flat stomach. Her emerald eyes, usually dancing with warmth, shimmered with unshed tears. "Thaddius, please. You know I've never been with anyone else. This is our miracle." His bitter laugh cut through the room's tension. "Miracle. I've been to every specialist in the country. The diagnosis was clear. I cannot father children. So tell me, Ilone, whose miracle are you carrying?" The grandfather clock ticked mercilessly as silence stretched between them. Outside snow began to fall, coating Boston in deceptive tranquility. "I've loved you faithfully for 5 years, Ilone whispered, her voice trembling. "I've never betrayed you." Thaddius rose from his chair, towering over her slender frame. "My mother warned me about you, said you were after my fortune from the start." His voice dropped dangerously. "I should have listened." Ilone replied, a rare flash of defiance crossing her features, "Just like you're not giving our child one." Thaddius crossed to the safe, hidden behind an original Monet, spinning the dial with practiced precision. He extracted a checkbook, scribbling with such force that the pen nearly tore through the paper. "Here," he thrust the check toward her. "Take this and disappear. Consider it severance for services rendered." Ilone didn't even glance at the amount. "You think you can buy me off? Pay me to vanish with your child?" "Not my child," he corrected coldly. "And yes, that's exactly what I expect. Be gone by morning." As Ilone turned to leave, her dignity somehow intact, Thaddius added, "If you try to contact me or make any claims about this situation, my lawyers will bury you." The bedroom door closed quietly behind her, a final act of grace she didn't owe him. Thaddius poured another drink, telling himself the hollow feeling in his chest was righteous anger, not doubt. By dawn, Ilone had vanished from his mansion and his life, taking only a small suitcase and a torn check that was now ripped to pieces in the wastebasket. Little did Thaddius know that 19 years later, fate would bring him face to face with the truth he had refused to see beside a gravestone that would change everything. Boston's biting winter air cut through Ilone's thin coat as she wandered through unfamiliar streets, clutching her small suitcase. The majestic skyscrapers that once symbolized possibility now loomed like prison walls. Tears froze on her cheeks before they could fall. $20. That was all she had withdrawn from the ATM before Thaddius had inevitably frozen her access to their accounts. No home, no money, and a baby growing inside her. Thaddius's baby. "Think Ilone," she whispered to herself, her breath clouding in the frigid air. "You need to get out of Boston." She thought of her college roommate, Margaret, who lived in Chicago. They had fallen out of touch, but Margaret had always been kind-hearted. It was a long shot, but it was the only one she had. At South Station Bus Terminal, the ticket agent's bored expression didn't change as he quoted the price, $127.50. Ilone's stomach dropped. She'd need to beg, something she had never imagined doing. Approaching travelers with rehearsed dignity, she was met with averted gazes and uncomfortable rejections. "Everyone thinks I'm running a scam," she thought bitterly, hunger gnawing at her stomach. "Excuse me, miss. You okay?" An elderly man with weathered hands and kind eyes stood before her. Something in his expression reminded her of her late father. "I need to get to Chicago," she stammered. "I have nowhere to go here." He studied her, not with suspicion, but with understanding. "I was homeless once," he said simply. "Lost everything in '87. Someone helped me when nobody else would. He reached into a worn wallet and handed her the exact fare. Pay it forward someday. That's all I ask. The warmth of the bus couldn't thaw the numbness inside her, but as Boston disappeared behind her, Alone allowed herself to breathe. She would survive this. She had to. 18 hours later, exhausted and disoriented, she stood outside Margaret's apartment building in Chicago's Lincoln Park neighborhood. Her heart pounded as she knocked. The door swung open, revealing Margaret's familiar face, now lined with shock. Alone. What on earth? I didn't know where else to go, Alone whispered, her voice breaking. Thaddius threw me out. Margaret's expression softened as she noticed Alone's protective hand over her stomach. Without a word, she pulled her into a tight embrace. Come inside, Margaret said firmly. You're safe now. The apartment was small but warm, filled with books and colorful throws. Margaret made tea while Alone explained everything. The pregnancy, Thaddius's accusations, her abrupt homelessness. That bastard, Margaret muttered. You deserve so much better. For the first time that day, Alone's shoulders relaxed. I don't know what to do, Meg. I have nothing. Margaret reached across the table, squeezing her hand. You have me, and you have that baby. We'll figure this out together. That night, curled under borrowed blankets on Margaret's sofa, Alone whispered to her unborn child, We're going to be okay. I promise you that. She didn't know how yet, but somewhere between Boston and Chicago, determination had replaced despair, taking everything except what mattered most, her dignity and the precious life growing inside her. Alone stared at her reflection in Margaret's bathroom mirror, her hand resting on the slight curve of her stomach that had begun to show in the past few weeks. She looked different, thinner in the face, her eyes carrying a new weariness, but there was something else too, a quiet resolve. You can't hide in my apartment forever, Margaret had told her gently that morning over breakfast. Not that I mind having you here, but you need your own life, for yourself and for the baby. She was right. 3 weeks had passed since Alone arrived in Chicago, and while Margaret's generosity had been a lifeline, Alone knew she couldn't build a future on borrowed space and borrowed time. The classified section of the Chicago Tribune lay open on the kitchen table, circled listings creating a roadmap of possibilities. Alone had been methodically calling each one, only to hear the same responses. No experience, positions filled, or the hesitant pause when she mentioned she was pregnant. Don't give up, Margaret encouraged, squeezing her shoulder before leaving for her teaching job. Something will work out. By afternoon, Alone had worked up the courage to walk into Sullivan's Diner, a modest establishment with a help wanted sign perpetually displayed in its window. The bell chimed as she entered, the scent of coffee and grilled onions filling her senses. What can I get you? Asked a stern-looking woman behind the counter, her gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Alone cleared her throat. I'm here about the job. The woman, Nancy Sullivan as Alone would later learn, gave her a critical once-over, her eyes lingering momentarily on Alone's midsection. Ever served before? No, Alone admitted, but I'm a fast learner, and I. She paused, swallowing her pride. I really need this job. Nancy wiped her hands on her apron. It's hard work. Customers can be demanding. Pay's not great. I understand. When can you start? The simple question nearly brought tears to Alone's eyes. Tomorrow, 6 a.m., don't be late. That evening, Alone celebrated with Margaret, the two of them sharing a cheap bottle of sparkling cider in lieu of champagne. First step toward independence, Margaret toasted. I'm proud of you. I don't know how to thank you, Alone said softly, when I showed up at your door. That's what friends do, Margaret interrupted. Besides, you'd have done the same for me. The next morning, Alone awoke before dawn, nervous energy propelling her through her preparations. The diner was already bustling when she arrived, truckers and early shift workers crowding the counter. Nancy thrust an apron at her. Tables 7 through 14 are yours. Coffee's always fresh, specials are on the board, and don't let anyone talk down to you. The learning curve was steep. Alone dropped a tray of dishes, mixed up orders, and endured the impatience of hungry customers. By mid-morning, her feet ached and her back screamed in protest, but she refused to show weakness. During a rare lull, Nancy appeared beside her as she refilled salt shakers. "You're doing better than I expected," she said. It wasn't exactly effusive praise, but Alone felt a small glow of accomplishment. "Thank you for giving me a chance," she replied. Nancy's eyes softened slightly. "How far along are you?" "Almost 4 months." Nancy nodded thoughtfully. "My sister's an OB nurse at County. I'll get you her information. You'll need prenatal care." The unexpected kindness brought a lump to Alone's throat. "I appreciate that." Days melted into weeks, and a routine emerged. Alone worked morning shifts at Sullivan's, saving every dollar possible. Her small tips went into a mason jar labeled Baby Fund with Margaret's neat handwriting. At night, she scoured community newsletters for resources, secondhand baby furniture, free clinics, and parenting classes. On her first day off, Alone visited the Chicago Women's Resource Center, where a counselor named Regina helped her apply for emergency medical assistance and connected her with a support group for single mothers. "You're not the first woman to start over," Regina told her, handing her a thick folder of information. "And you won't be the last, but you're doing all the right things." That evening, sitting on Margaret's fire escape and watching the sunset cast golden light across the city, Alone felt the baby move for the first time, a gentle flutter like butterfly wings. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I promise I'll give you a good life, no matter what." Back in Boston, Thaddius Kretton's business empire continued to flourish. His divorce from Alone was finalized quickly, her absence making the proceedings almost laughably simple. He told himself he felt nothing but relief as he signed the final papers, ignoring the hollow ache that had taken residence beneath his breastbone. In quiet moments, doubt sometimes crept in. What if she had been telling the truth? What if the doctors had been wrong? But he banished these thoughts quickly, focusing instead on acquisition deals and profit margins. He never looked for her, never tried to find out where she had gone or if she had had the baby. In his mind, that chapter was closed, the pages torn out and burned. What he didn't realize was that someday those ashes would rise again, reforming into a truth he couldn't escape. Meanwhile, Alone Kretton, who had resumed using her maiden name Bennett, was building a future, brick by persistent brick. It wasn't the life she had envisioned for herself, but as she glanced at the sonogram picture taped to Margaret's refrigerator, she felt something unexpected. Hope. 6 months into her new life in Chicago, Alone had settled into a rhythm that sustained her, if not fulfilled her. Her days at Sullivan's Diner had earned her a modest reputation for efficiency and quiet dignity. Regular customers now requested her section, leaving generous tips that she faithfully added to her growing savings. But as her pregnancy progressed, reality pressed in like the tightening waistband of her uniform. Her back ached constantly from hours on her feet, and Nancy had begun giving her concerned glances when she thought Alone wasn't looking. "You need a plan beyond waiting tables," Margaret said one evening as they browsed through a second-hand baby store. "Something that can support you and the baby long term." Alone ran her fingers over a tiny blue sweater. "I know, but what? I never finished my degree. No one's exactly lining up to hire a pregnant woman with no experience." "There are programs," Margaret insisted. "Job training, certification courses, things that could give you better options." That night, while Margaret graded papers, Alone pored over community college brochures and workforce development pamphlets. One particular program caught her eye, medical office administration. The training was only 8 months, offered evening classes, and boasted a 90% job placement rate. "This one," she told Margaret, tapping the brochure. "I could do this." The program cost was modest, but still beyond her current means. Undeterred, Alone made an appointment with the counselor at the community college. Lisa, the program advisor, listened to Alone's situation with practiced compassion. "There are scholarships for single mothers," she explained, "and payment plans. We can make this work if you're committed." Alone said firm. "I need to build something better." 2 weeks later, Alone began attending evening classes 3 times a week after her diner shifts. The exhaustion was overwhelming, but each completed assignment felt like a victory, each passing grade a step away from the desperate woman who had arrived in Chicago with nothing but a suitcase and an unborn child. At Sullivan's, Nancy adjusted her schedule to accommodate her classes, a kindness Alone hadn't expected. My mother raised 4 kids by herself, Nancy explained gruffly. Anyone trying to better themselves deserves a chance. By her 8th month of pregnancy, Alone's study schedule had become a challenge. Her ankles swelled, and the plastic chairs in the community college classrooms were instruments of torture, but she persisted, completing assignments between customer orders and studying flashcards during her breaks. "You're the most stubborn person I've ever met," Margaret remarked one night, finding Alone asleep at the kitchen table, face pressed against an open textbook. Margaret had transformed their shared living room into a makeshift nursery, decorating it with yard sale finds and hand-me-downs from fellow teachers. A crib stood in the corner, a mobile of fabric stars hanging above it, each one sewn by Margaret during their evening conversations. "It's not much," Margaret apologized, "but it's a start." "It's everything," Alone whispered, overcome with gratitude. On a crisp October morning, Alone's water broke while she was refilling the diner's sugar dispensers. Nancy drove her to the hospital herself, cursing at traffic and running 2 red lights. "Don't you dare have this baby in my Buick," she warned, but her hand gripped Alone's with reassuring strength. 16 hours later, Callum Bennett entered the world, 7 pounds of perfection with a shock of dark hair and eyes that, when they finally opened, were the unmistakable Kretton blue. Holding him in her arms, Alone felt a fierce protective love that transcended the pain of the past. "Hello, my darling," she whispered. "We made it." Margaret and Nancy took turns visiting, bringing practical gifts and taking photos that Alone cherished. There were no grandparents cooing over the new arrival, no proud father passing out cigars, but there was love, abundant and fierce. Across the country, oblivious to his son's birth, Thaddius Kretton closed a record-breaking real estate deal and celebrated alone in his penthouse office, ignoring the persistent emptiness that success could never seem to fill. The winter after Callum's birth was the coldest Chicago had seen in decades. Alone would bundle her son in layers of secondhand clothing before venturing out to her classes, grateful that Nancy had allowed her to return to the diner on a reduced schedule. Between work, school, and motherhood, sleep became a luxury she rarely afforded. On particularly brutal evenings, Margaret would insist on watching Callum so Alone could attend her classes without dragging the infant through the snow. These moments of separation, though practical, tore at Alone's heart. "He won't even remember you were gone," Margaret reassured her. "And you're doing this for him." Alone knew Margaret was right, but the guilt persisted, a familiar companion in her new life. It whispered that she wasn't enough, couldn't provide enough, should somehow be more than what she was. In quiet moments, she wondered if this was how single mothers had felt throughout history, constantly divided, perpetually inadequate. Yet there were moments of pure joy that made everything worthwhile. Callum's first smile, a gummy, lopsided grin that appeared one morning as she sang to him while changing his diaper. His fascination with the dust motes dancing in sunlight, the weight of his small body against her chest as he slept, perfect and trusting. One evening, while studying for her final exams, Alone sat with Callum in her lap, bouncing him gently while trying to memorize medical billing codes. Frustrated by her divided attention, he began to fuss, his little face screwing up in preparation for a full-throated wail. "Shh, Cal," she murmured, setting aside her flashcards. "I know, my mom's right here." She lifted him to her shoulder, patting his back rhythmically when suddenly she felt his tiny hand pat her shoulder in return, deliberately mimicking her motion. Something about this small gesture, this first communication of, "I hear you, I'm responding to you," broke through her exhaustion and tears spilled down her cheeks. "Oh, Cal," she whispered, "you and me, we're going to be just fine." That night, she wrote in the journal she had been keeping since his birth, "Today, my son reached back for me." It was such a small thing, but it felt enormous. He's becoming a person, not just a baby, someone with thoughts and feelings and ways of showing me he understands. I wonder if this is how all parents feel. This wonder, this terror, this overwhelming love. Does Thaddeus ever wonder about us? Does he ever feel the emptiness of what he's missing? I hope someday Callum won't feel that emptiness too deeply. I hope being loved by me will be enough. As winter melted into spring, Elone's determination hardened into something unbreakable. She took extra shifts when she could, studied during Callum's naps, and aced her certification exams with scores that impressed even her instructors. Her program director began sending her job postings, confident that Elone would be an asset to any medical office. Meanwhile, in Boston, Thaddius Kretton's empire continued its relentless expansion. He had opened offices in 3 new cities, acquired a failing competitor at a fraction of its worth, and been featured in Forbes magazine as one of America's most eligible bachelors. The article mentioned his previous marriage in passing, as his brief union dissolved before children could complicate matters. Reading this in his office late one night, Thaddius felt an unexpected pang. He hadn't allowed himself to think of Elone in months. He had trained himself to skip over memories of their life together, like commercials during a television program. But something about seeing their marriage reduced to a footnote in his success story disturbed him. He found himself wondering, not for the first time, what had become of her. Had she kept the child? Was it a boy or a girl? Had she found someone else to love, someone who could give her what she wanted? These thoughts felt dangerous, like stepping onto thin ice. He shut them down quickly, pouring himself another scotch and turning to the quarterly projections that demanded his attention. Real estate developments didn't build themselves on sentiment or regret. Back in Chicago, Elone Bennett was building a future, brick by persistent brick. It wasn't the life she had envisioned for herself, but as she glanced at the sonogram picture taped to Margaret's refrigerator, she felt something unexpected: hope. Elone's emotional journey could benefit from deeper layers, particularly in her relationship with Callum. While their bond is evident, incorporating more intimate moments that showcase their connection, like shared laughter, bedtime stories, or small daily rituals, would enhance the portrayal of their relationship. This could help the audience feel more invested in their struggles and triumphs, making their journey more relatable and impactful. Thaddius's character could be made more three-dimensional by exploring his internal conflicts and vulnerabilities. While he is initially depicted as cold and calculating, providing glimpses into his past, moments of doubt, regret, or even affection for Elone would create a more nuanced portrayal. This complexity could elicit empathy from the audience, allowing them to understand his motivations and the reasons behind his decisions. The narrative structure could be optimized by refining the pacing, particularly when transitioning between key events. For example, the shift from Elaine's struggles in Chicago to Callum's birth could benefit from a more gradual build-up, allowing the audience to fully absorb the weight of these significant moments. Adding transitional scenes that illustrate the passage of time or Elone's emotional state during this period can create a smoother flow and enhance engagement. Dialogue and details could be enriched to enhance authenticity. While the conversations between characters serve their purpose, infusing them with more natural, everyday language and emotional depth would make the interactions feel more genuine. For instance, adding subtle humor, shared memories, or even conflicts during discussions would create a richer dialogue that reflects real-life complexities. The themes of single motherhood and societal expectations could be expanded further. Elone's experiences navigating the challenges of being a single parent in a society that often stigmatizes such situations could be explored in greater depth, including more commentary on societal perceptions, along with Elone's reflections on her circumstances, would provide additional layers of meaning, making the narrative resonate more with contemporary audiences. Finally, the opening and closing elements could be strengthened. The beginning could benefit from a more gripping opening line or scene that immediately captures the audience's attention, perhaps by highlighting Elone's emotional turmoil as she contemplates her future. The conclusion should leave a lasting impression, perhaps by showcasing Callum's achievements in a way that reflects Elone's sacrifices, emphasizing the growth of both characters and the hope that lies ahead for their family. This would create a satisfying narrative arc, leaving the audience with a sense of fulfillment and hope for the future. First part, opening. Core elements to retain: Elone's emotional turmoil and Thaddius's cold rejection. The initial establishment of the mother-son bond. Specific improvement directions. Enhance Elone's internal struggles and her aspirations for the future. Deepen the dialogue between Elone and Thaddius to reflect their emotional conflict more vividly. Second part, Elone's struggles. Core elements to retain: Alone's life and challenges in Chicago. The supportive friendship with Margaret. Specific improvement directions include more intimate interactions between Alone and Callum to highlight their deepening bond. Detail Alone's job search process, incorporating realistic challenges and emotional responses. Third part, father-son meeting. Core elements to retain. Callum's initial encounter with Thaddius. Callum's emotional turmoil and his understanding of his father. Specific improvement directions. Add moments of psychological preparation for Callum before the meeting, showcasing his emotional state. Enhance Thaddius's reactions to Callum, illustrating his emotional complexity. Fourth part, reconciliation and growth. Core elements to retain. Callum's development and achievements in college. His reflections on his father and the lessons learned. Specific improvement directions. Introduce Callum's interactions with friends to portray his adaptation to the new environment. Elaborate on how Callum handles his father's inheritance, reflecting his character growth. Fifth part, hopeful conclusion. Core elements to retain. The close relationship between Callum and Alone and their outlook for the future. The legacy left by Thaddius and its societal impact. Specific improvement directions. Strengthen the hopeful tone of the conclusion, emphasizing their future plans together. Deepen Callum's understanding of family and social responsibility, showcasing his evolving values. First part, opening. Alone stood at the edge of her old life, the cold wind biting at her cheeks as she clutched the sonogram picture taped to the refrigerator. She felt the weight of her memories pressing down on her, the past intertwining with her hopes for the future. "We made it, little one," she whispered to herself, her heart swelling with determination. She had left Boston behind, but the echoes of that life still lingered, a constant reminder of the journey ahead. Second part, Alone's struggles. In Chicago, Alone faced each day with resilience. She had found a job at Sullivan's Diner, where the clatter of dishes and the aroma of coffee became her new backdrop. Despite the exhausting shifts, she cherished the moments shared with her colleagues, particularly with Nancy, who offered her support and guidance. Alone meticulously saved every tip, watching the mason jar labeled Baby Fund fill up slowly, each coin representing a step toward a better life for her and Callum. During her breaks, Alone often found herself daydreaming about the future, a future where she would be able to provide a stable home for her child. As she scrolled through job listings, she felt the weight of her circumstances pressing on her shoulders. Yet, with each rejection, she reminded herself that perseverance was her ally. "I will not give up," she told herself firmly, the resolve growing stronger each day. Third part, father-son meeting. When Callum finally stood in front of Thaddius, the atmosphere was charged with tension. The moments stretched infinitely as they regarded each other, two lives intersecting after years of absence. Callum's heart raced, emotions swirling within him as he confronted the man who had been a phantom in his life. "I need to know why," he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. Thaddius's expression was inscrutable, the years of distance evident in the coolness of his demeanor. "Why did he choose to walk away?" Callum pressed, searching for answers that had eluded him for so long. Thaddius's gaze faltered for just a moment, revealing a flicker of something, regret perhaps. "I believed your mother was unfaithful," he replied quietly, the weight of his past decisions hanging heavily in the air. Callum felt a mix of anger and pity as he realized how fear and doubt had shaped his father's choices. Fourth part, reconciliation and growth. As Callum navigated his college life, he poured himself into his studies, driven by a desire to carve out his own identity separate from Thaddius. He joined clubs, made friends, and began to flourish in the world of architecture. Each project he completed felt like a triumph, a testament to his hard work and determination. He often thought of Alone, her sacrifices fueling his ambition. During one late-night study session, Callum found himself reflecting on his childhood. His memories of Alone teaching him the importance of kindness and perseverance were clearer than ever. He realized that while Thaddius had built monuments of steel and glass, Alone had constructed something far more valuable, a foundation of love and strength that would guide him through life. Fifth part, hopeful conclusion. As the seasons changed, Callum and Ilone's bond deepened, their shared experiences forging a connection that transcended the challenges they faced. Ilone's unwavering support and Callum's newfound confidence in himself created a powerful dynamic. Together, they envisioned a future filled with possibilities. One evening, as they sat on the couch, Callum turned to Ilone, a sense of purpose radiating from him. "I want to create a scholarship in your name," he said, his voice filled with conviction, "to help single parents pursue their dreams, just like you helped me." Ilone's heart swelled with pride and love for the remarkable young man he had become. In that moment, they knew that despite the shadows of their past, they were ready to step into the light, carrying with them the lessons learned and the hope for a brighter future. Their journey was just beginning, and together they would face whatever lay ahead, united by love and resilience. As the vibrant colors of autumn painted Chicago, Ilone found herself bustling around the kitchen, preparing a modest Thanksgiving feast. The comforting aromas of turkey, mashed potatoes, and pumpkin pie filled the air, creating a sense of warmth and home. When Callum walked through the door, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, Ilone rushed to embrace him, feeling the familiar rush of joy that accompanied his presence. "Look at you," she said, stepping back to take him in. "College suits you." Callum smiled, the confidence he had gained over the past few months evident in his posture. They fell into their usual rhythm, chatting about school and life, the conversation flowing easily as they worked side by side in the kitchen. Although they didn't mention Thaddius, the shadow of his absence lingered between them, a silent acknowledgement of the past they were both navigating. After they finished dinner, they settled onto the couch with mugs of cider, the cozy silence wrapping around them like a blanket. Callum took a deep breath, a thought brewing in his mind. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation after I met him," he said finally, his tone more serious. Ilone nodded, ready to listen. "What's on your mind?" "I keep wondering if I was wrong to go see Thaddius. Did I betray you somehow?" Ilone shook her head softly, reaching for his hand. "You didn't betray me, Callum. You were seeking answers about your own life, your history. That's natural. But after everything you've done for us, I didn't want to put you in a position where you'd feel hurt again," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. Ilone squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with understanding. "I never wanted you to spend your life wondering about him. I wanted you to have the freedom to seek your own truth without the weight of my pain coloring your perspective." Callum reflected on her words, a new clarity settling over him. "I realized that meeting Thaddius was less about him and more about me finding closure. I thought I needed to fill this void, but now I see that it's just a part of my story." Ilone smiled, pride swelling in her chest. "You've grown so much. You faced your fears and emerged stronger. That's what matters." As they shared their thoughts, a mutual understanding blossomed between them, reinforcing the bond they had built over the years. Their journey together had not been easy, but every challenge had shaped them into the resilient family they had become. With the evening winding down, Callum turned to Ilone with a determined expression. "I want to create a scholarship in your name," he said, his voice steady, "to help single parents pursue their dreams, just like you helped me." Ilone's heart swelled with pride at his words. "That's beautiful, Cal. You're going to change lives. And I want to name it the Kretton Bennett Fellowship," he added, a smile spreading across his face. "A way to honor both sides of my family." In that moment, they knew they were ready to embrace the future, to step forward together, carrying the lessons learned from their past. Their journey was not just about surviving. It was about thriving, about creating something meaningful from the trials they had faced. As the sun set over the Chicago skyline, casting a golden glow over their home, Ilone and Callum shared a quiet moment of hope, knowing that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, fortified by love and resilience.